100%.
All right, Happy New Year. Welcome everyone to another webinar from Storage Authority. First one of 2025. We're going to be covering the critical keys for successful self-storage development. We'll be doing this on the second Thursday of every month. So if you signed up for this one, we're going to get granular on the steps for the future ones. So, please join us for those. Excited to be here with the panelists, the Storage Authority team. I'm going to make some quick introductions before we get going. So we got Mark Gooden. He's our CEO and founder of Storage Authority. Self-storage designer, builder, civil engineer by trade. His job with us is to make our owners' jobs easier. Kevin Harless, he's our development director. He brings 20 years of experience of construction and land evaluation. And his job is, with us is to help our owners avoid the landmines and get open ASAP.
Right.
Uh, we got Josh Parker as well. He's our tech expert. His focus is on efficiency of facility operations and team building. And his job with us is to help our owners operate the facility efficiently to maximize their profits. Myself, I'll be hosting this. I've been in the industry since Garrett Bird here. I've been in the industry since 2009, heavy on sales and marketing and new builds. My job is to make sure we're getting 1% better in the background. So, quick run over of our panelists here. I do want to jump in here and thank our sponsors. These are some of the industry leaders that are supporting, us presenting us to individuals who want to get into our space. So a big thank you to them. And we'll get rolling here. Did I skip one?
Nope, you're on target, Garrett.
All right, here we go. All right, so these are the 12 steps we're going to be hitting. We're going to get granular on each one of them. Excited to share them with you guys. I'm going to hand them over to Mark Gooden here to cover this slide.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. The first thing I need to let you know, I'm a civil engineer by trade. I'm not a public speaker. You might catch me looking at my notes. And I'll never be a public speaker. And you'll find out that, as an engineer, we don't sugarcoat anything. We get right to the facts. So don't let me scare you. But that's the first thing I want to talk about is you take a look at this list. And if I looked at this list, I would say, holy smokes, I'm not getting started in self-storage. That's an awful lot of stuff to do. But I want to tell you, being an expert in these 12 items is not your job. You just have to realize that these 12 items are there and build your team. Most self-storage developers are not even an expert in one of these items. Most people don't get started in this business because of fear, the fear of failing. So, I do want to tell you the three most important things that go with this list. And this is critical if you get nothing out of this whole presentation, if you understand the three things that will eliminate your fear. And the first one, takes three things to build self-storage. And one is takes partnerships. Success does not happen on its own. It takes a team of advisors. And those advisors include engineers, architects, bankers, real estate people, attorneys, contractors, self-storage experts.
I have to confirm an appointment.
And those are the people that are going to do these things for you. You do have to give them the direction. The second thing it takes is mentorship. The best way to learn faster and gain confidence quickly is to have a trusted advisor. Learning for somebody who's already done what you want to do. When I first became a civil engineer, the first 10 years, I took a couple of different positions, and it wasn't the highest paying positions. It was the positions I felt I could get the mentorship that I needed. And it was the best decision I ever made. You know, the third thing that you have to be aware of to build this business is deal flow. Without consistent deal flow, nothing happens, period. The ability to find, analyze, and close deals is what matters. And so that's where you've got to concentrate your first efforts on. You're never going to be an expert on that, but you've got to have that team that does that. I like to say it takes 100 takes you have to look at 100 properties to find three to make offers on and buy one. So again, as we go through these things, there's a team out there, and that's what Storage Authority does, is we help you with every one of these 12 things, by helping you find the appropriate partners, and by helping them do a great job as well. So we'll pass that to the next slide for Kevin.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. So, Kevin, I'm gonna ask you a question here on the self-storage industry. It's definitely exciting for sure. What in your mind makes self-storage such a great industry?
Yeah, Garrett, that's a great question. And what I think is exciting about it is exactly what Mark just spoke to, the growth potential in self-storage. The self-storage industry right now is a $48 billion industry annually. And projections are showing that industry is going to go to 65 billion within the next 10 years. And did you realize that 9% of Americans actually rent a storage room? And with drastic urbanization and smaller lots and HOAs and apartment multifamily housing coming about more often nowadays, we're looking at that number of people that rent a self-storage to go anywhere from 12 to 15%, Garrett. So what do I think that leads to? I think that leads to a bright future, just like Mark was talking about.
100%. So if you make the jump into self-storage and get ready to start the journey, what's the most important first step you should take?
I've always kind of gone by the whole Margaret Thatcher approach, plan your work your plan. And self-storage is no different. When you jump into research and development with self-storage, the first thing you want to do is put your team together, and then you want to go out and plan your work. You want to have timetables set up. What is your timetable for finding land? What's your timetable for construction? From the time you jump in to the time you open your doors, what do you expect that timetable to do? Create your team, have them work in their autonomous settings, and then work that timetable diligently and know about how much time and effort that's going to take you and how you're going to be able to do that with everything else you have going on in your life, Garrett.
Yes, sir. Measure twice, cut once, right?
Right.
Is there a certain amount of capital you need to have to get in the industry?
Well, that can vary. But to kind of give you some averages, an average self-storage development, by the time you buy land, build self-storage, do all of the things that go permitting, building your team, all these things, a self-storage project is going to be somewhere in the market of $7 to $10 million. And so with that being said, your owner's capital, you're going to have to go out and borrow that $7 to $10 million, whether you do that through a traditional loan or an SBA loan. But your capital probably needs to be somewhere in the market of 1.5 million. And the reason why is you're going to have costs that are going to have to come out of your pocket. You may even have to buy your land out of pocket before you can get the financing done. So to have that 1.5 million on a $7 to $10 million project is really an optimum value that you want to go for to have for capital going into a self-storage development, Garrett.
Gotcha. So one of the big elephants in the room is, how do you determine if self-storage development might be profitable?
That's where, just like Mark said, putting your team together makes all the difference. And from your general contractor or your design build firm, all the way to your CPA and your lawyer, all of them are going to work in there. And at Storage Authority, what we do to help is we've got calculators and we've got P&Ls that we can help put together for people that can show you a 3-year projection chart. Another tool that we use is we go out and look at competition and market saturation in the area. We find out what's going on with the market, how much can you charge, how many storage rooms can you put in the market, put that all into a calculator, get a good NOI, look at what that's going to be versus your expenses, and it's going to give you a real good indicator of whether that particular development's going to be profitable or not. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. So you need a good team to help you.
Gotcha. So those are all great points. Are there tools out there to help owners for everything you just mentioned? Are there tools out there to help them?
There really is. There's hundreds of tools out there, but some of the ones that I think work really well are Radius Plus. Radius Plus can take you in the markets. It'll show you the storage facility. It'll show you the market per capita. It'll show you rental rates. Store Track does the exact same thing. And then when you get granular and you're out there looking for land, you can use something called Regrid to help you look at parcels. It's going to give you data like the owner, what it was last sold for, what are the tax rolls, all of that information, what it's zoned at. Is there any type of issues at the facility or at that parcel that's going to cause issues? So yeah, there's a ton of different things that you can use. And when you put your team together, your team should have some tools at their disposal to help you get out there and make that work for you in your research and development plan.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a lot, and we'll definitely hit this hard on the next webinar we do as well. Moving on
Thanks,
to the next one, Mark.
Thanks, Garrett. Hey, I just want to backtrack a little bit. Kevin mentioned $1.5 million to, build a $10 million facility. It doesn't have to be that big, but that's an income that is, it's a large facility, let's say 80,000 square feet. That's going to allow you to replace your six-figure income. It's going to allow you to build a nest egg and retire. So, again, Kevin wasn't talking about a small side business. And where does that money come from? If you look at one of our sponsors, Diana Tennant, she has the ability to share with you how you can use your retirement fund, your 401k. You can actually, the self-storage will be owned by the 401k, so you don't have to pay any penalties or close down your self-storage. And that's good. And you still get to take an income out because you can be an employee of the self-storage. So if you want to, learn more about our sponsors, have Garrett introduce them to you, but they're all about helping you. But that's one way people come up with the money is use some of their retirement money, a portion of it. So let's look at the finding the land. That's the most important thing. And that's what everybody thinks is the most important thing until it's done. And then the next step is the most important thing. But finding land is the first thing we have to do. And it is all about location. The days of build it and they will come are gone. Now it's build it in the right location and provide superior marketing. So you need this land to be on a location where most people drive by because 70–80% of your traffic comes from people driving by your facility. And it's actually the ladies that are driving by, so even if you're on an industrial area with a lot of traffic, it's still not going to count because the ladies want something that they feel good on. So we talk about 3-mile radiuses because that's typically where 80% of your customers come from. We'd like to see 30,000 cars. We can't always find that, and so we have to set ourselves some kind of minimum, 10,000. And we don't count the highway traffic because they're coming from another community. That most people don't get on a highway to get to self-storage. So you're really talking about the traffic in front of the self-storage. So and then you're looking for a certain size property, and typically we like to build 80,000 square foot gross facilities for a total of about 65,000 net rentable, and that's because it can replace a significant six-figure income 5 or 6 years down the road. We build some smaller. We build them at 50,000 square feet. They work fine, and they make a retirement of a couple $100,000 a year instead of $400,000 or $500,000 a year. So you've got to look at each one of these things separately. So how much land does it take? We like to say, if you want to build 80,000 gross square feet, about 65,000 net on a single story, it takes 2 acres. It takes 6 acres to build 80,000 single story. Now, if you want to build multi-story, it only takes 2 acres. And so there's a combination between 2 acres and 6 acres where you can have a combination of single story and multi-story and make it work. And so that has to be determined, and it's also part of your budget because multi-story costs more to build. And purchasing the land is through a letter of intent. And there's 3 important things that you want to have in that letter of intent. One is obviously the price. And two is the due diligence period. The due diligence period is that period of time where you get to do research on the property, typically 60 to 90 days, where at the end of that period, you can back out of the proposal and get all of your money back. And I'm going to look at my notes over here. At the due diligence, and I'm just going to read this from an ebook that we're in the process of putting together. It's kind of following these slides here, but some of the things to do in your due diligence, and I'm just going to quickly read right from this worksheet here. Phase 1, environmental, zoning confirmation, engineer's review of the buildable area, the drainage, the grading, the stormwater, concept plan, endangered species check, soils and borings. You hit ledge, you hit a dump site, it can reject your site. Wetlands delineation, title report and boundary, third-party feasibility. So there's a lot of things to be done in that first 90 days. And so, that's why you need that due diligence term. But then the last period is, when is the closing going to be? Quite often we have a closing 18 months if we want to buy it with the bank's money. If we want to buy it with our own money, we can buy it right after the due diligence if we have enough confidence that it will get approved. So we could buy it in 60 to 90 days. But if we want even more confidence and actually obtain the site plan approval, then you're going to need close to 8 to 12 months in your letter of intent to purchase that land. And once you agree with the seller on the letter of intent, and then your attorney puts in a purchase agreement, and then you've got to follow those time schedules. So land is one of the most important things. It's covered out there a lot. Again, each one of these topics is a page or two just to hit the highlights of them. But with that, pass it back to you, Garrett.
All right, thanks, Mark. That goes to show it's definitely the cornerstone of your success is that location, location, location. All right, getting into zoning. Back to you, Kevin, and then I'll just shoot you a quick question. Is it hard to find land zoned for self-storage?
Garrett, everybody thinks it is. And I'm not going to say it's easy, but did you realize that 30% of commercial property out there is already zoned for self-storage? And so, with that being said, most commercial properties are going to be either zoned in commercial or mixed use, and that is a good fit for self-storage in most areas. So, if you get out there and actually review the zoning maps, you'll see that there is a lot of land available for self-storage, and it's not as difficult as one might think it would be.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this then. So if an area isn't zoned for self-storage, can it get rezoned?
Well, it can, and a lot of times you don't have to rezone an area. A lot of times it'll just need what we call a a conditional use permit or a special use permit. The best way to do that is to go to the city, find out exactly what they want you to do, and then you can go in to find out whether you need to rezone a property or not, or whether you can just go through getting a special use permit for that particular property.
Gotcha. So for the listeners, what are the zoning laws for self-storage? I know that's a blanket statement.
Yeah, and that's the number one question everybody asks me when we start looking at property, and the answer is always every city, every state, every province, every county has different zoning ordinances and different laws. They handle zoning differently. Even their programs are different. You have to go through city council. Some have a planning and zoning commission. And believe it or not, some places you're going to show up and there's one guy who has all the power, or one gal who has all the power. So my recommendation to anybody getting into self-storage, the first thing you want to do is go to the city, learn who they are, or the county or wherever you're wanting to put that particular development, learn what their trends are, go to their website, pull their zoning ordinances, read them. And if you don't understand them, get with somebody who's a professional who does, and you'll find out real quickly what you're going to need to do and what the laws and the particular requirements are in that city, province, county, state, whatever you're looking at, Garrett.
No, that makes sense. How about can you share some of the challenges of getting a property rezoned if it isn't available for a special use permit?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I want to bring a point to, Garrett, when you ask that question is that rezoning a facility, if you can at all find a self-storage property that is already zoned for self-storage, or all it needs is a special use permit or a conditional use permit, that is all the better. And here's why. 60 to 65% of rezone requests are denied. And those things take you a lot of time. They take you a lot of money, and you're going to come out the other side of it denied. And that's really going to put a big morale downer to your overall program. So if you can find land that is zoned for self-storage already, or requires, very minimal approval, like a conditional use permit, all the better you're going to be. Because you're going to get in there, and a lot of people say, well, Kevin, how do I know if I found the perfect parcel? And I'm not saying you shouldn't try to get a rezoning if you need to, but if you find the perfect parcel and you think you need to get it rezoned, my recommendation would be go to the city first, have a conversation, take them to lunch, find out what their temperature is for rezoning before you go through the whole process. I've literally walked into cities and I go, hey, I found this great parcel. We want to build self-storage on it. What's your thoughts? And the city goes, we're not building any self-storage in this town. We're not going to do it. Well, what if I put in a rezoning request? Yeah, you can do it. You can put in all the money, but we're probably not going to do it. At that point, why waste my time, right? But then again, I've walked in the cities where they go, oh yeah, we would definitely consider that, as long as it meets our architectural requirements, as long as it meets the standards of our city. Yeah, you can talk to them about sustainability and a lot of different things that might drive them in the right direction. And if you get a good feel for it, maybe you do go try for that rezone. But even with a good feel, you can get all the way through it. And like I said before, 65% get turned down. You may get turned down, and that's certainly going to cost you time, and it's certainly going to cost you money, Gary.
Yeah, 100%. Good tip on building those relationships with the town planner. 100%. Throwing it back to you, Mark.
Awesome. Design and approvals, are a fun part. They do take time, and that's certainly one of the first questions people ask. And for site plan design, it takes 2 to 4 months, and 2 months is the exception. And when I say 2 to 4 months, that's 2 to 4 months after you have a concept plan that has, your engineer has reviewed, you have reviewed, your architect has reviewed, and you've shared that with the town. So once you have that concept plan, that's when the 2 to 4 months starts. And I'll tell you that the biggest mistake I see in self-storage with the site plans and even the building plans is that the architect and engineer do not collaborate enough. That initial layout, there's not a civil engineer on this property that understands buildings typically as well as an architect. So they need to do that layout together. Make sure your engineer and your architect are 100% on board. An engineer might have a building at 33 feet wide. An architect knows self-storage buildings come in 5 and 10 foot widths and lengths. So, put those two together. The second biggest mistake I see with this time frame is that the engineers submit incomplete plans trying to meet a deadline. So that 2 to 4 months goes right out the window. It takes the town a month to review the plans, and if they've got 7 or 8 pages of comments, you're starting back at square one, getting those revised and back to the town. I've seen it happen. We prepare a list of over 20 things that should go in our civil engineers design proposal. So they're aware they're going to do all of these things. It might be that, it's going to include the Department of Transportation permit. It's going to include site signage and location, things that are often forgotten. And then we provide them another list of a couple hundred things to put on that site plan that is important to make us stand out. if you want a American flag, if we want a kiosk, what type of fencing we have. So having those standards for your civil engineer are important. And the same goes for the building permit plans. You've got to have that list for your architect. What's going to make your facility different? Otherwise, they're going to design the same thing that they've designed in the past. And the architect plans, you don't want to necessarily start those until you have some confidence that the site plans are going to be approved. During this process of development, you've got to overlap a lot of the things in order to get it done in a reasonable time. So the design is 2 to 4 months. The approval is 2 to 4 months. Again, with the 2 months being the exception. But a lot of that is on the back of your engineer, your storage, your self-storage expert, and your architect. But as you go through this process, here's a tip that people always tell me. I talked to my engineer. He said he's going to have it done in a month, and I call him up in a month, and he still needs 3 weeks to finish it. Keep in touch with them. Have weekly meetings. It might sound like a simple thing, but that's going to cut your time frame in half if you have weekly meetings with your architect and your civil engineer, and often combined with both of them during the design period. All right, Kevin, back to you.
All right, getting into construction, Kevin, question for you. What are some key things we should consider once we get to the construction phase of the self-storage project?
Oh, Garrett, you're going to ask me that question. So everybody get comfortable. We're going to talk for about 3 hours here. Are you ready? So no, I'll do what Mark tells me. I'll just do it all the time. I'm going to try to keep it simple. Really the two primary things that you need to do is, one, you're going to need to choose the construction approach you want to take. And two, you want to hire self-storage experts. Too many times in this industry, I've seen people go out, hey, I got a great contractor, man, he's built the heck out of some mini malls, and he's built this and he's built that, and tractors and retail stores, and you get him out there building storage and you have nothing but problems because he's never built a storage before, or that construction company doesn't have that experience, or your design firm doesn't have self-storage experience. There is no getting away from how self-storage experience can make your construction process go so much better. The second part of that question is, Garrett, choose the right approach. Well, do you want to go out and hire everybody individually, architect, engineer, general contractor? You can do that, but there are some really great design build firms out there that do everything in-house. And I'm going to tell you that works out a lot better in the end a lot of times, because you've got the designer, the architect, the general contractor all working there together on one project. They know what direction they're going. You've got good unity of direction. Whereas when you're working with a general contractor and an architect and an engineer and they're all independents, that can be a little bit more difficult for you at times, Garrett.
Yeah, yes, sir. So this is a kind of a loaded question. It depends on your region and relationships. What can we expect when it comes to construction costs?
You can expect it to be, you get 5 bids and all of them will be $20 per square foot different. That's what you can expect. The funny thing about construction cost is every firm's going to be different. Yeah, this is why you really need the industry experts, because I say you're going to get 5 bids and they're all going to be a $20 difference. The reason why is because everybody's going to bid it differently. So you need an expert who can go through that with you and say, oh, well, this guy bid with red steel and this guy built galvanized. This person's using 18 gauge and this person's using 16 gauge on interior walls. All of those things can make a big difference in your build price. But Garrett, to get more granular in what you're asking me, right now we're seeing bid prices anywhere from $80 to $90 a foot on a single story facility. Multi-story facilities will generally be a little bit more expensive depending on how many elevators you're putting in and what materials you're building. Are you building with steel, or are you building with concrete tilt walls? Right now I'm seeing multi-stories come in about $100 to $105 a foot. And of course, that depends on where you are in the country as well. So, at the end of the day, the best thing to do is go out, find a good design build firm that can help you walk through that process with your general contractor so you can get the very best. And a lot of times, one tip I'll give everybody is when you go out and bid, take every bid. Sometimes you will find line items in the higher bid that will be lower in the higher bid that are higher in the lower bid. And you can actually go to the lower bid guy and say, hey, such and such over here is giving me a better deal on this steel. Why can't you do that? And now all of a sudden your lower bid got better because of your higher bid line item. So those are some things that you can do. And if you've got a good team on hand, they'll help you do those things, Garrett.
Nice. So from your experience, Kevin, what's the number one thing that causes issue, on self-storage construction projects?
Well, it goes back to like I was talking about before with having a design build firm versus, a bunch of individuals that you're working with. And it's okay to have a bunch of individuals if you're willing to do that work. But to answer your question, what causes problems is change orders and things that were unexpected. And you get a lot less of that when the team's working in good unity. What happens is you got the architect doing one thing, the engineer doing one thing, they don't communicate. And then all of a sudden your GC doesn't have the right information and he goes out there and now all of a sudden we're having to make a change order because something didn't work out right. Happens continually on storage builds. And I've just seen a much better output when you go with a design build firm where everybody's on the same page. You get much less of those change orders, and those things cost you money, and they certainly cost you time, which time is money, right?
100%. Yeah, yeah. Cost overruns, that can be a deal killer. How about this for our listeners? What can we do to prepare for the unforeseen issues? Is there anything they can do?
Well, the one good thing is be active and involved in the process, no matter who it is. Whether it's your general contractor, your design build firm, your architect, your engineer. Mark said it perfectly. You're not an expert, which that is an actual advantage for you, because the great thing about not being an expert is now I can ask stupid questions and I can ask as many of them as I want and nobody can get frustrated with me, right? And ultimately, that's what you want to do. You want to show up and you want to ask questions. You don't want to irritate your general contractor. You don't want to irritate your engineer, your architect, or whoever else is on your team. But you certainly want to ask questions. You want to be inquisitive. This is your $8 to $10 million project. You've got to go in there and understand what you're doing. And then secondly, have a 10 to 15% capital contingency fund. Things will happen. It's Murphy's Law, right? What can happen will happen. And if you're prepared for that, you can continue to keep your storage build going in the right direction. If you're not prepared for that, now you're out there scrambling for money to get this thing done. So those are my two biggest, advice to do when it comes to unforeseen circumstances, Garrett.
Yeah, no, having that little bit of a reserve just gives you peace of mind when those cost overruns come in. So good stuff, Kevin.
Yes.
Quick shout out to Maritini contractor. He's doing our New Jersey project as we speak. That's a shot of a live image, and that's getting built right now as we speak.
Yeah.
Back to you, Mark, on the construction costs.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Kevin hit a lot of the points on construction costs. And I just want to emphasize there is no averages on construction costs because there are so many variables. And that, I just wrote down some of them here. I'm not going to read them all to you, but right off the bat, I came up with 20 variables. Okay.
Yep.
And so I'm going to give you a tip that most people don't want to believe until it happens to them. When you get a construction price from a contractor, let's say before you even have a piece of land, or once you have a piece of land and you hand him a concept plan that just shows a little sketch and he gives you a price, we have found that price is typically $10 a square foot lower than the same contractor when he gives a price when it's done. Oh, I didn't know we had to bring in a little bit of fill. I didn't know you wanted to have a nice office. I didn't know you wanted the cameras to cover every hallway. I didn't know you wanted A, B, C, and D. So you do have to be aware that there's a lot going into construction costs. not too long ago, maybe 7 years ago, long before COVID, Garrett and I, we saw a lot of construction costs in the 60 to $65 a square foot. And then during the peak of COVID, we saw construction costs for single stories between $100 and $120 a square foot. Okay. And now we're past COVID, but we're still seeing a large range in prices. And typically I use $80 to $100 a square foot for single story until we have plans. Maybe you have to widen the road, maybe you have to put a signal light in, so to use anything between 80 and 100 before you actually get out to the bid or have some plans that contractors are looking at, it's too tough to tie it down. Unless, sometimes you can know it's going to be in the $100 a square foot range just because you see a lot's going on that site. It's on a big hillside, you've got some ledge or something. So it's really, really difficult to determine the construction cost. But that gives you a range, 80 to $100 to use right now. Even the interest rates make a difference on the construction costs because during construction you're paying interest on that money that's been paid out to the contractor. So even interest rates make a huge difference. What type of loan do you go with to get that interest rates? Um, and and not only that, I can tell you, I could probably tell you 10 ways to save $1 a square foot. Now, if you're building 100,000 square, let's just take a look at 3 ways to save money. And one is when you build a self-storage, the site is never level. So they either have to cut, fill, they have to bring earthwork around or move it. You can't help that. It's going to happen to some degree. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's a little. But if you ask your civil engineer and it's in his contract, when he finishes the plans, he gives you the amount of earthwork that needs to be cut, taken out, and the amount of earthwork that needs to be filled, and how much of that can be used on site, how much of that has to be taken off site. If he gives you these numbers, and sometimes all of a sudden he says, hey, I've got to bring 100,000 yards off site, he knows he should have raised that site 2 feet. So the point is, not only does the civil engineer need to balance the site, the only way you're going to know he's done it is ask for the calculations. Put that in your contract. That will save you $1 square foot. I can't tell you how many projects we've gone back to the drawing board when the contractor looks at it and says, oh, I can save you money if you lower or raise that building. We've got one right now that hit some ledge in the borings, so we have to take that into consideration when we place the building. So a second way to save money is reduce the number of buildings. I can have 8 buildings or I could have 4 buildings. If I have 4 buildings, it's less forms, less walls, and less pavement. So maybe instead of a 65-foot building and then a driveway and another 65-foot building, maybe I can have one building that's 130 feet wide. So looking at the number of buildings, that can save 50 cents to $1 a square feet. And the type of buildings that are out there can easily save you over $1 a square feet. Architects love to make things beautiful. They love to make things the best in the world. And I don't disagree, but the street view, we make them look beautiful. You take a look at any one of our facilities, they are beautiful. But we don't bring block and stucco down the sides. We don't go crazy. Some of these architects will have a single story. They'll make the first story, the front of the office, 30 and 40 feet high. It doesn't need to be that high. Being the Ritz is not, is about service. It's not just about being that building. So look at the type of the building with your self-storage expert. Build for the community. Don't build the Taj Mahal that your architect might want to see there. So, you got to look at those type of things before you start the design. So, and then multi-story, I add $20 a square foot to build multi-story above the single story price until you actually get it. The contractors will tell you initially it's only $10 more. But when they start seeing all the details, the code requirements, it just seems to end up at $20 more a square foot. So most of our franchise owners are building single story because it costs less to build and it rents more per square foot. We just got a feasibility study back. Kevin, you got a couple. It was just a two-story facility that's in New Mexico. I was amazed at the difference in rental rates between the first floor and the second floor that the feasibility person put. So I really like single story, but again, the problem is finding that 5 or 6 acres. So here you can see myself and Ed. Ed is a franchise owner that built a facility in Houston, Texas. Um, this construction picture you're looking at there, right there to the left of that, was in Florida. You can kind of see to the front right is the office area, which is much higher than the rest of it to give it that look that we were looking for. We kind of make every facility slightly different based upon the land, based upon the community. Um, but it's important to be thinking about construction costs, especially at today's interest rates of about 7%, give or take 8%. Every dime costs, and people forget, oh, it's just 50,000 more, just 50,000 more. Take a good look and think about how can I save money without cutting corners. There's lots of ways. Back to you, Garrett.
Yep. And just real quick to the construction cost point, Mark, that I know a lot of our owners love is that addendum that's, instrumental that we put together. So it just helps with cost overruns. The contractors love it because, they know exactly what they're bidding on. If there's any gray area at the end of the day, the owners are paying for it and we don't want that, so that's huge for helping our owners.
Yeah, and let me give you a couple of examples. If your civil engineer site plan shows a decorative fence out front, well, and that's all it calls is a decorative metal fence, you're going to get aluminum. That's not going to last. Somebody can kick it in, it's going to rot versus a steel decorative fence. So, if you don't say anything about your gate control, I mean your front gate, you're going to get a piece of crap. You're going to get a machine that it's going to break down. It's not going to have a battery backup for when there's no power. So, one thing we help with that addendum is put in specific manufacturers, so you're getting high quality and everybody is bidding apples to apples. And one thing Kevin mentioned also in construction, and when you put construction out, is the contingency dollar amount. We usually put in 5% minimum because that's what the banks require, and some banks require 5 to 10%. So on a $7 million construction site, that's $350,000 of contingency money that is put in there. So if something goes wrong, the money's there, and the project doesn't start. But the more detailed your plans are, the more specs you have, and the completeness of them, I just can't emphasize enough. It's our goal for you to get that $350,000 and never borrow it or get it and put it in your pocket later on for operations. So good point, Garrett.
Yep. All right. Back to you, Kevin, and this is on loan options. I'll just fire off a quick question to you. So the lenders like to give self-storage loans?
Well, here's something I'll tell you. Self-storage loan default rate for commercial real estate, self-storage default rate is under 2%. So the answer is yes. They like good self-storage plans that are going to be profitable and have a good income potential, because they default very rarely. And also it's a solid asset if it does happen to default for banks. So yes, banks are out there looking to approve self-storage most of the time. Now, some banks are a little hesitant because it's a pretty big investment for them. But certainly there are banks out there like our partner here, Bank 59, who are out there aggressively seeking, good self-storage facilities to finance.
Nice, nice. Yeah, no, it's really what put us on the map back in that last downturn, 08, 09, how we performed against the other commercial asset classes as an industry. What are the most common ways to fund a self-storage project?
And we can talk about 100 ways to fund a, self-storage project, crowd sharing, investors, we can do all these things, but the two specific ways that most people fund a self-storage project is either through an SBA loan situation, or they do a traditional loan. SBA loans, generally, most people nowadays seem to be tending towards that direction. It requires, a 15% down in most situations. SBA loans are going to have a higher interest rate. But then again, an SBA loan is going to allow you to factor in your carrying cost into your loan. And for those of you who don't know what carrying costs are, that's the money set aside to pay for your bills and some of the other expenses during your ramp up period of self-storage. Most of these self-storage facilities don't break even until they're 14 to 18 months old. And so you've got to have some money income there, because when you open the doors, you don't have a renter, right? So you've got to get that money moving in. And that's where those carrying costs come from. On traditional loans, most of the time you have to have that money yourself. And in traditional loans, typically can be a little bit more when it comes to the down payment. I've seen them as high as 40, 50%, seen them around 20 to 25. So, those are generally the two ways that people are funding self-storage today, Garrett.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. You have a multi-million-dollar real estate asset. It doesn't break even overnight, so you got to have that reserve ready.
Unfortunately not. We wish it did.
So is there steps the developer should take to make the loan process go easier or faster?
100%. The better prepared you can be when you go into the loan process, the better. At Storage Authority, we have an entire professional loan package that we prepare with our franchisees to go to the bank with. And the bankers love it, because they get this loan package, and they're not only seeing a P&L, they're seeing a 3-year structure estimated of what this facility can do. They're seeing the development costs, they're seeing the carrying costs put in, they're seeing our 18-month ramp up, our unit mix. All of that is in there. And then another thing we do, which I think is very important, we go out there and shop the competition, and we give a detailed, comprehensive analysis of every competitor within a 3 to 5 mile radius. So that bank knows, hey, is this location actually competition? What do they do? Is this location someone, do they do climate? Do they not do climate? What does their facility look like? What's their manager like? We put all that together. And then on top of that, now we go in and we say, okay, here's why we can do what we do. We market. This is how we're going to market the facility. This is what our website's going to look like. This is how our facility is going to look. And so when the banker gets that professional loan package, they're sitting there going, wow, this person is serious. This is a great plan. And a lot of times that you've answered 90% of the banker's questions before they even ask you one.
Nice. Yeah. No, it's definitely, you go in there with a professional packet and you got a good team guiding you on your side. It's definitely favorable for the banks.
Well, it's funny. We had a franchisee just recently send one to the bank, and the banker sent him back a list of questions. And we looked at the list of 7 questions, and we literally sent back to the banker, 6 of these questions are already answered in the packet that we've sent you. So that tells you that we want to be prepared. And the banker, in his defense, he was like, oh yeah, I see that. And at the end of the day, it just makes us look like such a professional organization. It makes the actual borrower, or the person doing the development, look like this person is serious, and the banks take you more seriously when you do that.
100%. How about for our listeners? Is there anything they should know or be prepared for the loan process?
Yeah, absolutely. Loan processes take time. You're not going to submit the loan today and get approval tomorrow. These things 60 to 90 days in most cases, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. At the end of the day, when when you've got your parcel and you're going out to get your loan, you've got to be aware of these things, because you don't want to go out there and put in an LOI and in your word or your contract and put in wording, and now you're being held up by the bank, right? So if you know about that in advance and work with your attorney when you put your land contract together, it definitely is going to benefit you not to get behind, knowing that these banks do take some time, and obviously so. I mean, this is a $7 to $10 million investment for that bank, so they need to be diligent as well, right?
Yeah, if they're injecting, if it's an SBA loan, they're injecting 85% of the project.
Yeah.
They want to have their T's crossed and I's dotted.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll say that most people tend to neglect is the fact of go out and get a relationship with your banker. Learn who they are. What do they want? What's their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? And know them on a personal basis, possibly if you can. I'm not saying take them to the football game or anything, but call them up and have a conversation with them. It will go a long way in helping you build that relationship and working through that loan process.
Yeah. All right, last question for me. So is there a type of self-storage projects that banks prefer to lend to?
Yeah, banks do have preferences. I mean, self-storage is scalable. So that 60,000 square foot plus self-storage facility is going to have a better opportunity of producing the revenue and the income that you need, Garrett, to make a self-storage project go. So, these banks are going to prefer a larger project in most cases. When I say larger, 60,000 square foot plus, because they see those facilities succeed more often. And then another thing they want to see is, are you putting that self-storage facility in an area that's going to break even on time? And is it going to ramp up to be a stable facility? And if folks on this call don't know what a stabilized facility is, that means when you get to a stabilized income amount of the facility, 85 to 90% occupied, bringing in the revenue that you expect it to bring in, they want to see that on a specific timetable. The bank doesn't want to see you open a storage and you go, well, yeah, I'll break even in 4 years and we might be stabilized in 7. The bank's going to go, oh God, no, that's not going to work. So you've got to have a good plan. SBA requires 16 to 18 months on a break-even scale. And so at the end of the day, those are the things that most banks want to see. And go have the conversation with the bank up front and say, hey, I'm building a self-storage. What would you think a project that would be more attractive to you? And they'll tell you. And so that gives you a lot of opportunity to build and structure your self-storage development around what you can get approved with the bank, Garrett.
Very nice, very nice. Quick shout out to Bank 59. They've done several loans for our owners. Their team over there is instrumental in the process. So, always glad to refer them out.
Right.
Moving on to the next slide, Mark.
Great. Hey, one quick thing. If you haven't talked to a banker yet, email Garrett, 2 R's, 2 T's at Storage Authority, and he'll introduce you to Nick at Bank 59. That's one of your very first steps. So if you haven't talked to a banker, if you don't have an SBA banker yet, talk to him. We start with an SBA loan, but when you refinance 3 to 5 years down the road, then you typically go with your hometown lender, because the facility's up, built. You have the equity to build phase 2, or you have the equity to take money out. We find that most people refinance 3 to 5 years, so they take the money out that they put in themselves, or even double that, and they do that with a local bank. Owner's capital and total capital, we only got one more slide after this, so hang in there with us. I'm going to go over this fast. I'd have to ask you 30 questions to answer this question. So I made some assumptions up, and now that you see, if you go through this, you can say, hey, I don't have $1.5 million. I've got 2 million. I don't have $1.5 million. I've got 750,000. You can go backwards and forwards with this example. So if you look at the very bottom, I'm coming up with a construction cost, $7 million. And then I simply divide it by, we don't know the construction cost at this time. So I divide it by the 3 that we gave you, and it tells you how many gross square feet you can build and how many net rentable square feet. So now we're going to move back to the top to show you how we got the $7 million of construction costs. So you had $1.5 million. If you have $1.5 million and you're doing a 15% down, that means you got a $10 million project. You put down $1.5 million. the bank put down 85% or 8.5 million. So now you have a $10 million project. You know, out of that 10 million, we're going to use 500,000 for deposits, design, approvals, pre-loan applications. It might not be quite 500,000, but you know, I'd rather be conservative. And then the other part you put into the project is the land price, and that's $1 million. So, you know, and then you add in the contingency, carrying costs. You know, I put it all together, about $1.5 million is going to that, which so that money doesn't go to the construction fund. So that's going to leave us with 7 million. So if we had 10 million minus the 500 for contingencies and construct a design minus the million for the land equals 1.5 million out of the 10 million, 8.5 million, and it gives us $7 million for construction costs. So that gives you a range of square footages. And typically, you know, the REITs, one of the reasons, if you build over 40, and now it's getting closer to 50,000 net rentable, that's efficient for operations versus a smaller facility. And it's also the size that the REITs want to purchase. So if you build a small facility, you're going to get a lot less money, per square foot in that purchase price, significantly less. So again, if you're looking to build a retirement with a large nest egg, you want to be able to resell it. And that's why we typically want to, you know, end up with, you know, 50 net rentable square feet in for most cases. So this is just a quick overview. You'll be able to study this slide. Garrett will send you this slide book, but you can put in what you've got available. Now, this makes one big assumption that's not shown on the screen, that the project is going to be financially feasible. In other words, the rent there is high enough to cover all these costs. So we're making the assumption that it's going to be a profitable self-storage here, and that's something you do early on with your feasibility studies, or the calculations that, you know, we do a preliminary feasibility study to make sure it's going to work before we hire that third party that, you know, charges several $1,000s for that feasibility study. But even in their feasibility studies, they you know, you can go to 3 different guys and they'll have 3 different prices for construction costs. But in the end, it gets you to a rough P&L. So again, $1.5 million seems to do the job, but it can swing quite a bit depending on your goals and depending on where you're located. Back to you, Garrett.
Yep. Quick shout out to Tenant Financial. You know, Diane and her team over there, they're great. I'd say about 4 of our owners actually use their retirement funds to deploy and fund their self-storage development. So it's called the ROBS program. They're the experts over there. Anybody wants an introduction, just shoot me an email. All right, bat and clean up here. Josh Parker is going to take over this last slide.
All right, I'm going to go through this quick because I know we're right at the end here, but pre-opening preparation is huge, and it does oftentimes get overlooked, and people are often behind the 8 ball when they come to time to open. They're behind schedule because they didn't have the resources or materials, or they weren't informed, you know, adequately enough on what they needed to do prior to opening. And so that's why we've developed over 60 pages of our guidance book is dedicated to pre-opening tasks. That's a lot of stuff. There's over 50 hours of pre-opening training mapped out in there, checklists, training, detailed instructions, guidance. It's all in there, but it's a lot. And it all is with one goal in mind, and that's so that when you open your doors, you have customers lined up, ready to rent, and you're ready to provide them with top tier customer service from day one. There's you know, this says 4-page bulleted checklist. It's more like 6. It's about 6 pages, and it starts from the time of construction starting. And then it's broken down 6 months, 4 months, 2 months prior to opening, with detailed lists of exactly what you need to do to get prepared, to what you need to purchase, to have on hand, have ready to go. Software, computers, everything is in there. And it's details, details, details that, like I said, oftentimes get overlooked until it's too late. One of the huge things is marketing. You can't wait until you open to start marketing, because then you won't have those customers lined up at your door ready to go. You won't have those dozens of renters with their units reserved prior to opening. So there's a lot there, but it is so important. I can't stress enough the importance of being prepared for that pre-opening preparations, starting at when ground breaks in construction.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Yeah. I mean, the sooner you buy into that you're in the, as a self-storage owner, you're in the sales and marketing, and you're in the hospitality business. I mean, self-storage is great. It's a great real estate play. It's a great business to run, but you got to set yourself aside, especially if you want to be the Ritz and a price leader in your market, and you want to have that avalanche of move-ins. You got to have a good game plan. You got to have the checklist in play that it's just a smooth opening with the avalanche of move-ins. All right, jumping on to the meet the team here. Obviously, we're all here. Great team we have here. We all have our own unique skills and assets that we bring our owners, but we're here to help. Whether you're with us or you have questions, fire away. Our contacts on the next slide here. So with this, you guys all see our phone numbers, email addresses. We're going to open it up to Q&A. I am going to stop the recording, so anybody who sticks around, you have access to the team. Fire away any individual questions on your projects or general questions. We'll stick around and answer them for you. But I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording so we can go ahead and answer those questions you guys might have.
Garrett, it's still recording.
Yep.